All right, here we go. Welcome to the SMPTE meeting here at the Lero Corporation. We're glad you could be here. We know we have folks online. My name is Tom Aquilin. I'm the Director of Technology for Lero. Again, we're glad to be hosting SMPTE this month. And I just want to throw out a quick ad for Lero because in a couple months we're going to be back here again and we're going to have a small open house featuring several manufacturers and hope that not only the folks in the room will be here but you guys will be online. With that, I'd like to introduce Jim Lean, who's going to continue with the program.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jim Lean. I'm one of the program managers for SMPTE for 2017, 2018, I guess it is. Really excited about this program. It's something that I had been talking about with some of the people for a couple of years now, and it finally came together. Just a couple of thank yous. One, really want to thank Lero for stepping up because just over a week ago, our facility that we had scheduled called us and said, sorry, you can't do it. And so we were able to, Tom was nice enough to arrange for us to be here tonight. I'd also like to thank AC Video Solutions, who is my employer, for the food tonight. Those of you who are online and on the stream, see if you come to the meeting, you get free food. And we got some left over, so if you're quick, you can make it. Just a couple things just on the membership side. We always like to do a little plug for members. I know we have a few people here who are not SMPTE members, and if you are not, we have some information up here about it. Chuck Deal over here is our membership chair. Excuse me. And he'd be happy to talk to you about things. I've been in SMPTE for, I don't know how many years now, but it really is a valuable thing. If you're not a member, it's worthwhile. Hopefully you're working for a company that pays the membership, but if not, it's still worthwhile and it is tax deductible. So I'd strongly recommend, if you're not a member of SMPTE, to look into it. And especially now, because there's a real push for sections like this to be streaming like we are tonight, which means you'll be able to watch presentations from all the sections around the country. So it's the ability to meet new people and learn new technology is great. One little thing, in case you hadn't heard, some of you may have known Dave Guerrero. He passed away last week. Dave was a longtime employee with NEP Super Shooters. He was also the general manager of Videotech and then Leach, when Leach bought Videotech. So I worked with him for a short time at that point, and most recently he was the CTO at WLVT for about the past 5 years. He passed away of a brain aneurysm last Thursday, so he'll be missed. He's one of what we call a video dinosaur, and sorry about that, because he was if you knew him, he was a great guy, and if you didn't know him, you really missed out. So tonight we have a presentation from Source Digital. We have two presenters, Hank Frecon, who's a local here in the Philadelphia area. He's the Source Digital CEO and has been a seasoned technology leader for more than 14 years, bringing in-depth understanding of creation to consumer dynamics of media enterprises. Prior to starting Source Digital, Hank was the managing director of Radiant Grid Technologies, which is where I met him. We worked together for about 2 years, where he led operations and oversaw the company's finances. Hank's previous positions include VP of Business Development of Agnostic Development Corporation, a media technology development company, and as a consultant to CBS Corporation, Hank managed projects focused on strategy and development of the CBS digital vision under the CIOs group. He also owns and runs a wonderful little brew pub in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. So if you're ever up that way, look for the Other Farm. Our other presenter is Michael Phillips. He is the Source Digital VP of Products and Engineering and is developing second screen storytelling and synchronization, which is what the presentation is on tonight. He received a 1992 Technical Emmy for his role in development of the original Avid 1 media composer. Michael also earned a 1994 Academy Award for Science and Technical Achievement from the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences as a pioneer in the digital switchover of Hollywood to nonlinear editing. which includes the co-invention of the Avid film composer and design of the Avid media composer. And also on the way up from the airport, I learned that he started out wanting to be a chef and studied in France, and then was studying classical guitar for a number of years before coming over to the dark side. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hank, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
How's it going? So, yeah, it's interesting. We, Michael and I both, met through Source Digital and, through the early stages of it, which was called Sceneventory. Sceneventory essentially because we started really thinking about, in our old jobs, right, at Avid or at Radiant Grid, we were dealing with a lot of metadata, right? And I think as an industry, we thought a lot about metadata, and I know I'm in an engineering group, so I can take the gloves off and not have to not be technical like all of our advisors always tell me. So, we had to deal with a lot of metadata at at more of a container level. And any time-based metadata was really restricted to stuff that another computer might need to know, like aspect ratio, color information, RGB data, in order to make an intelligent encoding decision. And then what I mean by the old days, meaning in the early days of digital, right? And then the only really visibly time-based data is things like closed caption or subtitle data, right? And when you start looking at the amount of potential information that is potentially sitting within the content, and you start looking at what we call cultural currency, or people's ability to connect to that information, I always use the analogy in that Facebook didn't invent friends, they just invented a way to create an infrastructure that friends could connect through, right? And through that became monetized, through that became advertising strategies and things, and brand integration strategies. So, in my old world at Radiant Grid, when we were dealing with encoding decisions, we were looking a lot at that time-based data in that domain, but all of the descriptive information was always reserved for the, in the container sense. So, we were dealing with like the new AMWA specs, for, ASO2, which is originally ASO3, which is originally ASPBS, developed for the PBS standards, broadcast standard format for carrying MXF data. In Michael's domain, there was a lot of a push to standardize a lot of this stuff into the upstream process in post, how you deal with it there. And so, we really wanted to look at the new way of interactions, and when you start thinking about cross-device. So we have this sort of little image here, and subtly, if you look at it, there's, slightly different, yet related things going on every screen, right? And if you think about the viewing environment today, and you think about the world that, the next generation of viewers are going to exist in, a lot of people think, it's crazy when you say, oh, okay, by, in 10 years, VR and AR are going to have a bigger market cap than traditional television. And you're like, no way, right? But you start thinking about it, you start looking at a 10-year-old who's going to be 20 in 10 years, thinking about what their world is like for entertainment and how they lean into things. It's not like they sit in front of the internet and say, okay, internet, entertain me today. It's never the way they were brought up, right? So for us, it's a foreign concept to think like that. But as engineers and as, people who are looking to continue to transcend within the industry, we have to start to think a little bit about, how do you deal with this information? So, like all technologies, we have to have a business goal, or else we won't have a funding way to move forward. So a lot of the advent of why we invented the technology was to start to look at some of the trends that were taking shape around the business of media, right? So, we can all look at advertising and understand that while we're willing to be tolerant to it, the next wave of viewers is not so tolerant, right? Those trends continue to play out in the market. There's transaction VOD, but if we look at music as how many of you buy music now on a regular basis, right? So the reality is, you want to own The Godfather, you want to own, Star Wars, but probably the rest of it you don't really care, And so, then there's subscription VOD. So now what? Well, we'll all have 1,000 subscriptions in the future. Maybe my wife just cleaned out about 10 of ours, including Netflix. So, I'm sorry, I don't get to watch Netflix anymore. She's like, this is ridiculous. You don't watch, you're on YouTube more than you are on this. So, I think that's where we have to start to think about content, and it doesn't just apply in entertainment. This applies in business. You know, it applies in terms of how you tell stories and use video to tell stories and what value you want to get. And what we're ultimately seeking is more analytics, right, underneath that. So what we do is we at Source Digital help content owners, brands, broadcasters really look at untapped revenue streams by thinking about brand integration strategies, thinking about commerce and content. It's a little crazy to say, you know, what if you want to buy that sweater, right? What if you want to know about that location and make a decision off of it? That's what we're going to show you today, how that can happen. So, you know, obviously the old adage, a picture, you know, tells 1,000 whatevers. But the point is that inside of 24 frames per second, right, you can tell a lot of a story, right? And that story has traditionally been reserved for just the primary plot line, right? But often two people sitting on the couch watching the exact same thing are going to have very different impulses about what is interesting within that content, right? And it's not to say that literally, you know, every time you touch that thing, you should get a result. Different content has different things, and we'll talk about some of our customer examples. But, you know, let's say you have 5 models on a runway in a quick pan shot. You're not going to touch their lips and see what the lipstick is, right? It's not realistic. But you do have to think about how do you deal with that type of information in a span so that, you know, like at CES, we demonstrated, Alexa asked Source what Andrew Lincoln is wearing right now. And she's like, oh, and, you know, and she comes back and looks at the data that we have around that and then can tell you, right? Or, you know, maybe you don't want to watch an hour or 2 hours of VR, but maybe if your phone buzzed you and said, hey, VR racing in 30 seconds, pick your driver, pick your, you know, nitrous, pick your wheels, right? We could be one of the riders in Fast and Furious, right? And so in that case, right, now we've just increased what we'll call shelf space. For retailers, that's important, right? We think about A shelf space, B shelf space, C shelf space. So, you know, in terms of looking at screen optimization and maximizing the screen, we can really start thinking about how to be non-intrusive to the audience and let them take decisions about what adventure they want to go on, what way do they want to be marketed to, what about the brand do they find interesting, and the brands can get more value on the back channel of those analytics. And we'll look at a real world test we just got through with one of our clients that runs on Velocity called Toy Makers. And it's an automotive brand integrated reality show that's I think it's one of the #1 spots on Velocity. They control their rights in that equation, so they're able to have a little more flexibility. But we are, you know, think that there will be adaptations that the network will want to embrace as well. And Comcast is, I see you're here from there, you know, with the Xfinity platform, with you know, a lot of the extra metadata that can be there. You know, a lot of things. If you start looking really into that platform, you'll see that there are extra content that's there that's time-based. You know, starting to map in that domain. You guys acquired a company called Watch With that was really focused on the upstream component of this. You know, and in our case, we're focused on that how do you extend that information in a proper, contextually relevant way. A lot of times you're going to keep hearing AI. It'll get there, right? But, you know, it's like I always use this example. If I have an AI system that I run, and we've tested a lot of them, and it might give me somewhat accurate representation, but I don't have a good understanding of the inaccurate representation, it might have guessed wrong at the data. But if I have access to the finance department's database and the cast and crew information store, and I can index the script, the shooting script, and get continuity metadata, I can pretty quickly understand who's in the boundaries of that content and what that's more important than maybe literally touching the person, right? And so you have to think about the engagements, and we'll talk about that. So what we do is we allow you to increase revenue from content by turning data into actionable purchases, resulting in the creation of commerce and content. We allow you to track brand engagement. We bring back younger viewers by making the content more interactive, so that lean in kind of model. And we get unprecedented insight into viewer behavior. And, it was really interesting on Friday night with the season premiere of Toy Makers, like sitting back, I felt a little bit Big Brother-ish, but we didn't necessarily know the user, but it was interesting when we watched, oh, look, a guy in Georgia just bought a shirt. Oh, here, California's lighting up right now on the West Coast feed, and there's 17 people looking at Miller Electric's brand in the show, and you're like, wow, that's a real-time analytics that you can start to think about how you might take action on. So we're at the very forefront of this. We don't know exactly where it's going, but we think that organizing data against time and extending that out can be really valuable if you think about it from that perspective. Next slide, I guess. And we're going to do some live demos, so I'm trying to keep some of the slides short. How we work is a little bit of the fundamental understanding. I mean, a lot of people, the first thing they'll say is, well, you're just tagging video. You're just tagging data on video, right? And yes, you're right in the sense that you're organizing data around the content. But the real trick is, how do you deal with that at scale, right? So if you think about it from the standpoint of, first of all, yes, Amazon has X-ray, and that works really well if you're always in an Amazon world, right? But when you start to move beyond that, and you're in what I call the batting cage, where you don't know necessarily what pitch is coming, right? And for those of you who may or may not be familiar, the ATSC has what it's ATSC 3.0, which is really starting to think a little bit more about this, right? Because, you know, how do you create, you know, the next wave of digital? One of those beliefs is that this interactive component of personalized data, personalized engagement will be a big factor, and that's why folks like Dolby and the MPEG-H Alliance and really working with the CE manufacturers to create hooks in the content so that you can start creating these relationships of data and content. And we look at ourselves as somewhere in the bridge of that, and we have invented our own methods for dealing with that, and we'll talk about the technical nuances of that. But essentially with Source, we don't physically sit inside the content. So, you know, there's no way in the world you could possibly host that amount of information at that moment inside of a compressed file, right? And when we think about that, what I mean by that is not necessarily the volume of information always, but also the dynamic change of that information. So, you know, sometimes that information might be really relevant. We have a client who was, you know, it's all OTT video, but they did, you know, we were using our affiliate recommendation engine to take metadata that they had from their programming and spin that in and cross-section that off of Amazon, Walmart, and use the margins to create value for them so that when you touched it, even if they didn't have the product, they could still sell it. Well, you know, after a while, they started seeing some traffic, and they went and replaced the makeup brushes from pointing on the back end from you know, Amazon to Vanity Planet because they got more margin. So that happened behind the scenes. The user really never cared, nor did it matter. It's just the very next click, whatever platform they're on, now is driving that attribution event from a different relationship. So if you had physically bound that into the content, you would have, you know, lost out on that ability to create a new margin threshold within your monetization strategy. So we're really pushing that boundaries of blending tech and content monetization in that ability to kind of point the content, point the data. Then what we do is we look to align that data, right? We want to get into the accuracy, and obviously we all know about time code. We all know there's 1 start time code and 0 start time code, and there's different variances between countries and standards and TISIA and PAL, and all that gets fairly complicated if you're always trying to use the time code, right? Now, in a closed streaming platform, you can use the time code, right? But if you start to think beyond that and trying to tie relationships together, I always do a little demonstration like this. I'm going to change the picture. I'm going to change the picture. I'm going to change the picture. The one mathematical constant in the environment was the audio, right? The audio is that thread that persists no matter what. And so when we think about how Source looks at the world, we like to link that data to the audio. Because at that point now we can tie that in, and that's where a lot of our IP sits, is how we align that data against the audio of the content. And then what we can do with that is a lot of interesting things. And we'll talk about some of those things in a little bit. But most importantly, it means we don't physically have to stay with the content. We could, you know, essentially tie ourselves to content in the beginning, and 2 years later, that content could show up in the batting cage of whatever player, as long as it's either A, hosting our SDK, or B, hosting some of the new standards from, you know, that are going to be coming out in the ATSC environment. We can immediately find the relationship and get back to the user exactly what they want to know. What location is that right now? You know, what is that thing, that car that someone's driving right now? Those kind of, you know, feedback loops. And from there, then we can create experiences, and then the brands that are helping to underwrite the content, because no one's watching ads anymore, can start to get some real analytics about it, right? So 2 case studies we'll talk about. So this is American Beauty Star. American Beauty Star is a show on Lifetime right now. It's halfway through. You can go to their web. Now, we're not activating the show itself. We're not in the live broadcast. We're actually in their OTT environment. And what's happening is, they chose this format where you'd have, almost like an X-ray style view. You can, if you hit the branded environment, because they're talking about health or makeup and fashion and beauty and fashion, it'll pause the video. At that point, they can expand, and you can look that up, and we can start to really track product activity and understand purchasing events and things like that. If that continues to be successful, they're going to try to really build a programming infrastructure, both on the digital and on the traditional side, that coincide with each other to continue to create a more massive brand for themselves. So that's one way of thinking about how you could use our tech in an entertainment environment. Another one is Toy Makers. I referenced them. So this one's a companion app experience. So their decision was they wanted to try to extend more value to their brands by literally tying, there's a full interactive format around it that integrates with their web and with their video content. But what they also do is because we're using the audio, right? And because our technology depends on that, we can listen across the room. So we'll show you today how you could be sitting, and I think maybe some of you have played with Shazam, right? For the music, right? Now that's returning a set of data holistically about the music, right? What we're dealing with in Toy Makers is that engine is in that moment, in that shot, and now we need to show what's going on in that, shot, right? It could even be, and we'll show you one of the harder ones we do, which is creating a representation, a dual mirror of what's on the screen just by hearing the relationship of the audio and actually XY coordinate maps, so you can actually touch the things and get results that way. So you could be sitting there and pop up on your mobile a dual representation of that video, and then touch in the video. Those analytics that we were able to pull out get us into the brands, into the viewer behavior, and a lot of things that they can use to kind of evolve the storylines and start thinking about season 3 around. So those are just some of the things they're doing. We talked a little bit about Michael and I should also mention our other co-founder who's fixing bugs right now and working away, so we get to have fun. He's in Los Angeles, and Patrick Green is a little green in the media and entertainment space, but has been working with audio in the telephony space for quite a while, and really jumped right into it out of college. And he's just a really smart guy who's really helped take our vision, Michael's and mine, and put it into code. So in terms of how it works, right? So we're a cloud platform. So we throw that word around cloud. We actually sit in the Microsoft Azure stack. We are, there's lots of cloud strategies. We like that one because of their access in the countries, and we're a .NET-based code stack. So we also use a non-relational database. That's really important because of the correlation of data and the importance of that data to the content. And the nice thing about that, for those who don't know, your more structured databases have a purpose, and they're relevant in like billing policy management, things like that, where you're dealing with really rigid concepts. But we may have a show about wine, and wine doesn't matter to anybody else in any of our other customers in a multi-tenancy scenarios. But for that one title, it's really important that there's a data category that can track wine, right? And so in our system, you can just go in, a user can create their own data type specific to their piece of content, and suddenly now that's a trackable analytics piece, right? It's something that you can extend to the audience. Maybe it's the documentary Somm, and now suddenly the wine brands that are featured in that can get extended just to that title. And that production company, that network, that entertainment company may have lots of other use cases for other types of data like cast and crew, location, storyline, but wine is just important to that title. And so that's where our database strategy, and we've had to evolve off of that even for search. Maybe you don't really want to know, and watch the whole segment of This Old House. You just want to get to the part where they're working on the deck, because that's the project you're dealing with and that's the moment you're trying to get to, right? And so you can also use our data strategies and structure to move off of content and get right into the moment of that content through more, search. And we're working with natural language processing to kind of extend that a little deeper. The different viewer experiences. So if you noticed on that last slide, we had different things going on related to the same piece of content, right? Maybe we were using a utility like Amazon to get back shopping information. Maybe we're doing a screen-to-screen sync because I'm going to grab and go and I just want to take it with me. Maybe I wanted to know something and touch that screen that I couldn't touch my TV yet because 2019 hasn't hit yet and I don't have the ATSC standards built in. Maybe I just want to kind of see the blender and monetize off of that. So these are all different ways of thinking about those relationships, and we handle that in the next slide by aligning the data and isolating it by viewer experience and by timeline. So we create these virtual timelines essentially that allow you to engineer by platform. So it's the same content, it's the same relationship of data to content, except to the extent that you've bound that to a virtualized timeline that now becomes that data span that you've assigned to the mobile strategy, and maybe a different one to the TV strategy, and maybe a different one when it's on a brand partner's website because they're picking up 30-second clips because they were featured in them. Maybe that brand wants to turn off their competitor because you have many brands integrated in the same shot, and you just want to change that, right? So all that can happen by isolating that. The other thing that we do is we've built a very solid rules engine against the data. So we've all seen Minority Report, when you walk into the room and it's guessing who you are and stuff. But the reality is there's a lot of wealth of information you get digitally from viewer statistics, from personal strategies. So, it is, again, a little big brother, but if you think about a 20-year-old, they're less inclined to be concerned about that because they know by giving up some of that information, they're going to get a better experience. I always use this example all the time. So programmatic, I think, for advertising, for those who don't know, it's sort of trying to just look at trends and patterns and give you one way, a set of story to say, you did this previously, you probably would want this, right? Well, it sounds logical, right? Except to when I actually went and my mom was trying to get some hiking boots, and I helped her out the other day back in the summertime, and I personally didn't learn about any of these boots. A friend in my life, a tastemaker, told me about Salomon boots. I said, Mom, I like Salomon boots. I went and bought them. Now, no matter what I do, I'm getting marketed Salomon boots that are women's hiking boots. Well, there's a lot of problems there, right? I'm not a woman, right? I'm not interested. I already bought the boots, and so those are some problems, right? But if you think about how you could also tie programmatic against the storyline and create more personalized decisions because you knew it's a male, you knew I'm between the ages of 30 and 50, maybe that I'm 43, maybe that I live in a specific location, right? What kind of attribution event might you display for me, right? Than the female that's 18 in California, right? And that's something that you can just set up in our rules engine that allows you now to display these attribution events, we call them, or direct response events, back against the content when that person touches or listens or grabs or whatever, right? So I think that's a key thing is understanding that relationship. And this doesn't have to be a one-directional conversation. This isn't always about us pushing stuff to the user. It can also be interesting to think about what the user's interaction might be back, right? Quizzes, game shows, engaging more openly with the user. Maybe what they were tweeting to a friend could be stored along that line so that the next time the friend's catching up in OTT, they've got that friend's message left for them, right? Lots of ways of rethinking this. And you could also go to the corporate environment and think about training, right? What if you wanted to question and answer somebody during the way they're watching the content just to make sure they qualified because they're taking an OSHA course, right? So you start thinking about how you might use video in that environment. Maybe you want to have a talking head over here tilling the instructions, and then, you know, it's like, okay, everybody put on your VR goggles, we're going to see what it's like to fall off of a forklift, right? And so that's how we can start thinking about the relationship of screens and the relationship of data within content. The other thing I'll point out, a lot of times people think of data as, you know, text, right? But data is any ancillary content, right? It's it could be a, you know, GIF, it could be a motion graphic, it could be a still shot, it could be music. So these correlated events, you know, somebody once said to me, "I love your stuff because it sounds like I could start out in New York and end up in Tijuana and not really know how I got there, but who cares? It was fun, right?" And so you can think about how the content journey might take shape. And, you know, you're watching a little bit of this, like with HBO's just launched Mosaic, which is sort of a spin in that direction. But I think you can go a lot further with technology like ours. So next slide, I think, is there any left? That's it, yeah.
Your audio in there is pretty consistent. And
Right.
You're using audio as your triggers, if you will.
Yep.
What happens if the audio's quiet or there are gaps or
Yeah, good question.
different languages
Yep.
maybe? How do you link all that together?
Repeat the question?
Oh,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah, so really good question. So, you know, the audio, you know, in a lot of the cases I described, you know, he said is very consistent. But what happens if the audio that you're dealing with is some crickets or it's silence, right? And you're trying to create and facilitate an event back based on that, right? And so, you know, you're exactly right. The way that we think about it and deal with that is a couple ways. So one is that we are maybe the span and the duration of the event, and we just are dealing with these adjustments actually with toy makers in real time, is because they tied cover flow art and the rev of the engine constantly, and the car was, you know, creating some confusion about what data should persist. So it gets fairly technical very quick, but we can, if we know that the duration is 30 seconds, and we know that we're looking for some really accuracy thresholds that we have to watch for, then we can create in milliseconds checkback loops to keep checking till we hit that pattern again. So essentially what we're looking for, and this is in our patent, we're looking at with the energy characteristics within the frequencies themselves. So we're actually looking for acceleration and deceleration rates, and then we create a profile on that, and then we recompile that profile down to create the match patterns. And at that point, that's how we create those representations. So that way we hopefully can get beyond the crickets or get beyond that still moment in a time-based duration that's relevant enough or fast enough for a user. Now, I will also point out that this is where, you know, we don't know exactly where everything's going, but there's some other ways to deal with this, right? So let's say that you're using sources data strategy, but, you know, I think the Dolby AC4 has a component of it called IAT, which is every 300 milliseconds inside of that audio codec, regardless of the characteristics of the audio, but more specifically, think about it as timestamp plus ID. Now you know, regardless, that you're at that location, even if it is silent, right? Because it's inside the codec. Now that doesn't help listen across the room in that scenario, but another way to compensate for what you're asking about could be video fingerprinting. There's a great app, I really like it, it's called Tunity, so you can go get it right now. It's built perfect for bars. It's like you're sitting in the bar and you're watching your sports game and you can't hear, but it's literally a video fingerprinting app. So you can hold up and use your camera to actually represent your location. And we're having dialogue right now about how could we combine the best of both worlds to deal with video fingerprinting and audio fingerprinting together to make sense of it. Yeah, right.
Just to answer your other question,
Yeah.
language doesn't matter. We're not really doing any kind of phonetic phoneme or speech-to-text representation. It's really just the energy characteristics across frequency bands as they change.
Yep.
Did I not turn it on?
Yeah. There you go.
Let me start over.
Take one.
To answer your question about language is the way the patent works is more about energies, changes up and down across frequency bands, and it's not really about like phonemes that are tied to a language or any type of speech to text. So language doesn't really change the sync relationship or the identification.
So your natural language processor is more of a natural audio processor.
Right, and we can have multiple of these XML structures that define it could be for each language if you want to go that way, or maybe there's a different mix for a different country, but the content is still the content, right? So we know the timing based on that's audio frequency representation. So when it hears it, it would say, oh, I know it's Fast and Furious, and this particular version is the French version, right? Because it was fingerprinted as the French version.
Yeah, and so to expand on that, I don't think I can say who is a client, but it's a major network, and they do syndication. So this is another use of our technology that we didn't originally invent it for this, but it sort of fell out of a byproduct, and it's the kinds of things that I'll give it another one after this. It's pretty interesting, but they have some potential syndication violation issues going on in foreign markets. So they syndicate their programming to different markets, and in those markets they suspected in one particular market that the airing was happening more than it should have been according to the contract regs. And so they asked us to go pretend we were a customer in that market, and they gave us access to the master files. It's not like they could recall that content and put watermarks in it. The content's already out in the market, right? So we can go through and fingerprint that content using our technology, store those relationships, and now we're giving them back analytics that show them when the promos were, restitch and ignore the commercials and create the whole length masters back together again, so that way they know it was a 21-minute version of X. If I say the content, you'll know. So, but they're just trying to make sure, and they're not looking to create legal action here. They're just trying to enforce some sales policies, because what could they do with that data? This is where business intelligence comes in. They could quickly go to their customer and say, hey, by the way, you're over your limit. Wouldn't you want to, it seems like you like this programming, why don't you re-up here? Or maybe it's a first rights window thing, and they can say, oh, okay, in your market, you've already aired this, sales, quickly go find a second or third option for this, right? And let them know they can go ahead and air now. So there's lots of different ways to think about how you might employ this technology. Another one that we're working on right now is with a subtitle company, because we got asked to try this out. What if you could host 25 languages alongside the content? And so this one was interesting because they not only want to host 25 languages, they want to start to look at the markets that content's in, and maybe they never knew that there's a Spanish population in Bulgaria that really likes that particular piece of content. But you can get the analytics now to see what language track is being selected out of the 25 different options, right? And so, typically we're restricted to 2 or 3, right? Or, in Discovery's case, they try to host about 16, but they don't always get through, right? And so those are kind of some of the ways of thinking about this. And the one guy said, he's like, I love this. This is great. I got forced trying to rethink subtitling in a file-based domain. Now I can get back to baseband workflows where I can just start throwing it back up and creating a synchronization along the timeline again, but do it in a digital sense, right? And it's not like you can't do that in a closed architecture. It's not like Apple can't do that inside between the relationship between iTunes and that player. But again, I get back to what if you A, are not Apple and you're trying to put a platform on the market, or B, what if you are in the batting cage and you're just not sure what pitch is coming as a player, and now you've got to display that data and that attribute, right? So maybe we should do some demo time. So,
Get your phone out.
Yep. So we'll show, this is a piece called the Road to ACL. It actually has an in-screen component as well as a companion screen component. The neat thing about this is it's got a little of everything in it. Let me just pull it up here. It's got lots of different, there's guitars, there's music, there's, oh yeah, maybe take them through the timeline while I load this up.
So you have different data types that have been created for this particular project. I can go to,
And who selected those data types?
This was curated by the content owner in this
content
particular
owner.
case. So they may have a deal with AT&T was the sponsor of this particular documentary. Of course, there's Austin City Limits, the show, the city, the concert, and of course all the artists that are part of it. So Alabama Shakes, Atari was a sponsor. So these are all just data types that we can suck in programmatically through an XML structure. We can bring in Excel spreadsheets, whatever form they might have a database of these products and brands already available. And you can view them by data types. We have cast members, caption files, costumes, coupons, emotional type, spans that we want to say, find me the sad scenes and things like that, right? So everything is a time-based type data type that gets represented in a timeline in a graphical way. So here's all my products: car, radio, feature people, Gibson guitar. So if I were to scroll down and somewhere along the way there's a Gibson guitar that's going to take place at this point in time in the video, which is right here. Right, so at 2 minutes 49 seconds in, basically there's a Gibson guitar. So all this is just metadata that's graphically represented, but now we need to serve that up with whatever rules or regulations to the end viewer. And this is going to be a two-screen type scenario. So I'm going to play the video. The consumer has the app, and they're going to listen to this thing happening, and it's going to sync up and then start serving up all those data types in time, however you see fit to offer that experience to the end user. The whole UI and experience is designed by the app developer or the web developer. We sort of deliver all that metadata in time to say what's happening now, what's happening now, what's happening now, and we deliver that. So I want to play this.
Yeah, and it's not just the metadata in time, but also the locations of the data, like some of the XY coordinates might be important, right? Whoop. Well, I synced pretty quickly until he paused me. So it'll catch up and resync here, because now we've set the algorithm to repace. So it's going to just have to catch up here a little bit. There we go. So we caught up. So now we're in the zone, right? So if I wanted to hit that sign, right, I can go, and to me that might be really important.
Yeah,
So I can get the Alabama Shakes.
So what you're seeing here is, I can see a couple looks in your eyes, is I'm playing this locally off my laptop to here, to the sound here. This is streaming another stream of the same content, but in this case, we're supplying all the overlays of the data types that I curated in that timeline. So you're all watching it this year. You don't want to see all the stuff popping up on the screen because you don't care. My wife doesn't care. I care. And that's why I would have this particular app. So as the main show is on, I can just glance down anytime and say, oh, it's in sync with the video, but I'm interested in that guitar or that location or where, because we're serving up those interactions as an overlay in the synchronous method. In this case, the video stream.
I think also show them the XY locations that we were seeing on that, and I'll just go into this and show you also.
So when you say you're going into it, you're going to a site somewhere for the road to ACL?
Yeah, this
that
could
links the two together?
Yeah, this could be an Austin City Limits app. This could be whatever the host fabric is. We don't necessarily care, right? So in this case, I'm playing it back locally. So this might be on, that customer's environment. It could be on the, Comcast environment. But now at this point,
Look at the data type, right? There's all the information I can put into the data type. Shopping, display links, all the social media type stuff, so we can associate all this additional metadata to this one product data type, which is called, Austin Bicycle, which is a bicycle rental shop in Austin. So they want to advertise into this particular documentary because there's a lot of bicycling, and it's a fairly healthy city. So that part is the data type structure, but then once it's timed against the where's the screen resolution?
I'll just close it out there.
The
But if you go
so
to
this
the
is
old
placement in
timeline.
time, and then when I go to its position on any of these objects is the ability to say where does that point in time need to be on the screen. So we're creating kind of an XY, and then what is the overall hotspot of that whole area. So if I were to tap anywhere in that frame, in that red frame on this video, then it would be, that data type would be served up.
Yeah, so for example, right now I've stored that data right here, right, in the relationship. Now I didn't physically store it there. I stored the coordinate and the location in that XY coordinate, and then now the data is just tied loosely to that area. So at that point, that's Route 80. So I'm going to touch that, and now I can see, is there something related to Route 80, here on the roads that build America, right? Maybe that's a way of marketing Route 80. Again, we're just giving you ideas at this point. The content, like a toy maker's side, they got a lot more literal to the actual, which is what they're supposed to do with the brands and the relationships in that capacity. The American Beauty Star one, it might be worth checking that out. go to, oh yeah, do Sam's Garage. That's a little more entertaining than a bunch of beauty products. So this is on a particular website.
So this is a web embed version, so it's all happening here on the screen.
To have around the shop. If you're looking
And
for
as I
some
hover the mouse over the video, then these things kind of pop up. I can get additional information.
Presented by ARP.
If you hit that, it'll take you into a little XY. It's a little.
Or I could, if I'm impatient, so
Hey,
there's,
welcome to Sam's Garage.
here's who Sam is.
Right here in my
So
own
again,
shop
time
here
to when Sam showed up on the screen.
Go ahead and hit the icon. It'll pause the.
Yeah.
Now,
So hit the CarMax.
So if I go to CarMax, then the video will pause. And this is information being served up from the Source Digital platform. We got a little description, we got some samples, and then you can go and enter your own zip code to find one near you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all different types of activities, interactions that you can engage the viewer with on them repurposing their library of shows that they've had, that's now out of broadcast, but they want to repurpose their content.
The nice thing is that, something that I wasn't forced on me, right? I got to make that decision while I was watching the programming.
you know
So.
how hot the Jeep market is. People are buying these Jeeps, the first thing they
Now
do
we
is
start
put
getting into
winches,
some extra
compressors.
products, so in this case, they want to sell the Peerless, they want to sell some of
Onboard
the other
compressors,
information.
lights all over, all kinds of electrical gear, CB radios. Well,
Right,
if you
so
watch
there's
most
this
people, and we're all
thing,
guilty
there's
of
the
this.
Peerless, there's
They
the
run all-
app fastener. It can get more info, or we could just go ahead and straight buy it right from there, and then everybody's sharing in the revenue that's coming off of the affiliate engine.
All of the wires to the little ring
And so
terminals,
if
put them
you're
on the
impatient,
battery.
you can just say view all, you can say let me see all the cast members, or let me just see all the products that are involved with this particular show.
So what kind of questions can we answer? Because let's make it a little more interactive than us demoing. Yeah, sure.
You shown two completely different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I can understand how you're playing the video and link it to the content on a separate device.
Yeah.
But I'm not clear, this is, the video's a stream coming in that the client controls the stream and then what gets overlaid, is that?
Yeah, pretty much like
So you have kind of the player plane and then a graphics plane, and
sure.
you can stop the stream and bring in the content
In a case where you
through
have-
one link?
In a case where you have control of the player. So in this case, it's a web page, it's an embedded player, and we can take control of that player. So we have timed in our timeline on Sam's Garage all these products when they show up, and the rules of the experience engine that we said when playing this video, when I mouse over, just display little icons. That's the experience that we designed. Should the user click for
So that's
further
like an
information-
HTML5?
It's an HTML5 all happening right here. Should the user click on anyone to go further explore what that particular icon might be about, pause video, and now bring up more information. If they close, continue playing video. So those are the basic, a style sheet if you want to think of it that way. So in this case, we call it a single screen experience or in-screen experience. It's all happening within the player. In the case of the Road to ACL one, that could have been a broadcast television. I was just playing it off my laptop, but I'm watching broadcast TV, and we have a branded app called Road to ACL, or maybe we self-identify it. That's where everybody in the room can just pay attention to what they want to pay attention to, but I have a different experience because I'm in sync with the show based on our audio to know where I'm at, and then I can experience the show deeper personally rather than bothering everybody else in the room.
And in that scenario, you probably would not have player control, it's just
No, in broadcast, you're on,
broadcast,
yeah.
yeah.
Right. And that's where the companion, technology comes into play of being able to, kind of use another device to create a relationship or an understanding that you might want to take action to. Yep. Yeah, and we've tested, we're in the startup class, but we've tested around 10,000 records for discovery of, data within content, and we're pretty quick at finding it. You don't have to say what you're, watching. You don't have to say, because we're not only establishing the data within the content, we're also establishing or authenticating what actually is the content itself, in order to create that understanding of the relationship that was stored in the cloud, essentially.
So if we did all episodes of a TV show, I could just randomly one night in syndication, once playing, you could just launch the app for Seinfeld, let's say. It's going to know which episode it is, a la Shazam, but we're also going to know where you are within Seinfeld to
Jim.
do whatever you want to serve up in time.
So when you're in a two-screen scenario,
Yeah.
let's say you're sitting there and you see something you want, you click it. Can you also just log it and go back and look at it later?
We talk about a bookmarking function.
Bookmarking,
Yeah, you
My
can.
age, I'm kind of like, no, I really want to kind of pay attention to what's going on here, so I just want to tap it, bookmark it, because I want to revisit it later, but at least I know that I want to revisit it later, and not try to remember, what was it that I thought about, so we
Right.
call it a bookmarking function, but it's exactly that.
Yeah.
So all that's up to the developer who creates the experience at the back.
Well, and we store that data. So if you bookmark, we know that relationship with that bookmark, where it was in time. So that becomes an analytic point, and it also becomes something we're holding for you, and that is the time that maybe you need to identify yourself. So maybe in Toymaker's case, they're anonymous when they come in, but because they're entering a contest, because they're buying something, then they move up that acknowledgement chain. So.
Hank talked a little bit about the education side, where I do a lot of talking to, because I come from the film school world, and my background is they want to do the same tapping, but instead of being more of a bookmark, all the students would have their little phones, are showing a movie, and it's an intro film 101 class where they're still teaching them what a wide shot is, what a medium shot is, what a medium close-up is. So the game, as they're watching a particular show, is tap whenever you see a medium close-up. So they just tap their phones in time. We know when they're tapping, and then the teacher knows all the students by their phone, their login to the class, and they can watch the analytics in real time as they're getting it or they're not getting it. And we can actually serve up the questions on the phone saying, now tap on long shots. When did the character change? Why did the characters, what was the clues of a character changing their personality? Was it because of the music? Was it because of the angle of the camera? All the storytelling techniques that people use. So teachers have been quite responsive to this as to get the students engaged in class through the devices using existing content. Yes?
Have you guys checked into working with any medical schools? Because this could be a good tool for
It's
that also.
Yeah, schools in general, yeah, absolutely. We're working with a large library, just in early discussions now. And they said, we have a ton of content, but it's not just film students, it's political science students, because their content can speak across multiple different types of classes. But medical, certainly, because my wife is in the medical field, that it's always in the back of my head as to how can I play in that world, because I like the money from the medical world.
Surgical recordings.
Yep.
They can have their students go in and say, all right, now show me where's the duodenum and where
Yep.
should we clamp off this artery.
Exactly. So the same way that we show that little red box in the location, that's the answer, right? So the correct answer is over here. If they tap over here, then we know they're off by whatever pixels, and the answer is wrong.
Like, you keep referring to like the Rotate
Rotate,
ACL app and the Velocity app. So for each, or Seinfeld app, so for each program you want to watch, do you need to download that app, or is there like a generic?
Yes
That's
and no.
really, well, that's, honestly, that's up to the opportunity strategy, right? Like, what is, our clients are all over the map, right? So we have some that are the original program itself. We have some that are networks. So it's really not like, we've talked about, should we put out an app, but as we all know, marketing an app, being an app, that's a business in and of itself. We've chosen to stay focused on the platform and technology that can enable anybody's app that wants to do these kinds of things, right?
Yeah, we talked in the cars. Eventually, the question comes to who wants to own the analytics, the data, or the end viewer. And it could be the brand, it could be the content owner, it could be the channel, it could be Comcast. Who wants to have that relationship to the end viewer and what they're up to? And it could be all of them, or one of them, or partnership between several of them. So
And
they're the ones who will create. And that's a marketing decision. I want an app that's really my brand. So Toymakers is really, their whole world is Toymakers. The show, the app, everything. So to them it made sense to have an app called Toymakers. AMC may say, all my AMC shows are Televisa, whoever we're talking to. All my soap operas are going to be under my Televisa brand. Because Televisa is the brand, but is going to recognize all their shows because we fingerprinted all their shows. So it's really up to who wants to have that relationship and own that data.
Right, and it's not really restricted to an app. It's like that's just today's interactive framework or today's digital frameworks are set up around, in-screen mobile, type viewing environments or web-based viewing environments. But like we said, the standards are at work right now to create these kind of models for the future of television as well. And there's even some customers we've seen putting AR Easter eggs inside of the content and wanting to see if we can do some stuff with that. So really where it will go, we don't know exactly yet, but I think we'll get there with Princess Leia standing on the table and at some point, right?
And we're not rolling out radio. We have a lot of interest from entities that also have radio divisions, because audio is audio and they want to know the same analytics of their listeners. They could have loyalty apps that just sit on the side of the car while I'm driving, and then you could be pushing coupons because this one is sponsored by International Tire Company or whatever. Instead of just saying it, boom, you actually know that they got something from you, things like that. So there's different ways, that we're looking, that the customers are looking to use this type of technology to further engage their listeners and viewers and
yeah.
What I call them viewsers.
Viewsers, yeah. So I think there were some questions, early before we started the analytics side of things. There's lots of different analytics we can run, so just understand the basic framework of tracking. I'd love to bring up some of our clients' analytics, but I'm sure they wouldn't want us to share those with you. So especially if we're being streamed, if we could turn the camera. No, I'm just kidding, client. But so this is a demo. There's not much here, but this is just what we were doing on that Rode ACL, and you can see maybe cast members I engaged with. Here was the I clicked on that Alabama Shakes data type 4 times in the last month. Maybe there was a shirt that I bought here for $4. That kind of stuff. Like these are all different ways of looking. Did I get clicks? Did I redirect off of something? There's also, I'd have to, let me just do this, Shift Command minus, just to try to get the view up there. So if I go here to Shift Command minus again, we have a little, I might pull up.
Information's the Azure cloud, you're writing that in a standard database, if you will.
Part of our database here, but everything that we are is a GUI to our APIs, and everything we do is available via APIs to anybody who is using the platform or has an account or licensing it from us.
Yeah, here's a test. It's a little hard to see the formatting on for some reason. It's just the way it's laying out.
Resolution of that projector.
Yeah, let me just see if I can shrink it down here. So this is some test data with Fox New York. And when The Simpsons ran last, there was a bunch of different. We didn't segment that up and group it holistically, but these were just some tests that were run. 5:19 a.m. There was 6 minutes of here this episode of Dad Behavior. So you can kind of think about how you might look at data for not just for pure analytics, but also for monitoring, for advertisements that you're trying to keep track of. Did they actually air for the full? So maybe you want to get in front of that make good issue before it comes back to bite you because somebody didn't get that ad out in time. Lots of different ways to think about how you might use this, but essentially the fundamental IP is really tightly structuring data relationships, not the data itself. So that data living inside of cloud, always being able to change, always being able to pivot, always being loosely related to any screen or across screens, but always making sure that when the user wants to know or the content owner wants to know, they can use it in the moment, in the time, right, that's relevant.
We talked about like incentivizing, because everything's time-based. I can make a change just like that I may want to, let's say it's toy makers, and they say if you watch during the initial broadcast on Friday night, 8 p.m., which is the initial broadcast of each episode, you're going to get 20% off of a t-shirt, but anytime after 11 p.m. after it's done, or 12 p.m. after it's done on the West Coast, you don't get that anymore. So if I watch it the next day or in PVR, I may only get 10% off. So you can start incentivizing people to earlier times in a broadcast. It might have more value from the ad sales in the first place. So it's all kind of connected in some way that you can start incentivizing and taking and leveraging even broadcast shows on a linear channel.
And you can schedule feeds as well. So you can set up a schedule. You can essentially go in and set a live feed. And so you may not know exactly when the pitch is going to occur. that's the big important pitch, but you could use stats data to create a relationship that says when he throws a no-hitter, make sure and get his jersey that's signed by him, and the top 5 bidders get to bid on it. These kinds of ways of thinking monetization through a little more than some remnant ad that's just trying to be thrown at you, right? Any other questions? Or I know we have till 8, so I think we're pretty much on time.
You don't
Yeah, it's great.
All right. Cool. Well, Jim, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
So thanks to the streaming crew.
I kept to my promise of 90% talking and about 10%.
Next month's meeting,
Not set yet.
not set yet. Okay, so stay tuned. I'll just pull it like this.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just I thanked my employer AC Video Solutions for the food. Then I got a little sidetracked earlier. I just wanted to do a little bit of a promo. As I think I said, we're a system integrator up in New Jersey. We're a woman-owned small business and trying to expand our business. We're a very small company. But one of the things we have just done, and especially for the broadcasters in the audience, we are the exclusive dealer for a number of products in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. They are Playbox video servers, MNC Software, which is a video platform or a facility monitoring platform, IP Tech, which is a contribution quality encoder that is now used almost exclusively by ESPN, Fox, and Bloomberg and NBC, I believe. And then a rather innovative product called WebClip2Go that I'm kind of hoping to do a meeting on someday. But so I had to throw my little promo in there because I think my boss is watching. So, so everybody, thanks for coming. Thanks again to the streaming crew. And hope to see you all next month.
And thank your boss from us for
All right.